This is Porch Lore, and I'm your host, Devin. This is the tale of Grandpa's Cabin. It's strange how places can carry an energy, like an echo of the lives that passed through them. Some echoes fade, lost to time, but others remain, etched into the walls and the soil. I never believed that until the night I stayed at the old cabin near Blackwater Ridge. The cabin belonged to my grandfather. He built it back in the 1950s. A modest structure with hand-cut logs and a tin roof that clattered in the wind. As a child, I spent summers there, fishing in the lake and exploring the dense woods that pressed against the clearing. But as I grew older, life pulled me away. The cabin sat empty after my grandfather passed, slowly being reclaimed by the wilderness. Last fall, I decided to return. I told myself it was to clear my head after a messy breakup and to get away from the suffocating city. But deep down, I think I was searching for a piece of myself that I had left behind in those woods. The drive up was uneventful, but as I neared Blackwater Ridge, a sense of unease settled over me. The trees were thicker than I remembered, their branches intertwining to form a canopy that blocked out the sky. The road narrowed, twisting through shadows that clung to the landscape like cobwebs. When I finally pulled into the clearing, the cabin stood like a relic of another time, its weathered timbers gray with age. The first thing I noticed was the silence. No birdsong, no rustling leaves, just an oppressive stillness that made my skin prickle. I chalked it up to nerves and busied myself with unloading the car. The cabin smelled of cedar and dust, the air thick with the memories of summers long past. I lit a fire in the stone hearth and settled into the creaking armchair with a book, trying to shake off the unease. By nightfall, the temperature had plummeted. The wind howled through the trees, rattling the shutters and making the roof groan. I told myself it was just an old cabin, reacting to the weather, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there. Around midnight, I heard it, a faint tapping at the window. My heart raced, but I forced myself to stay calm. Probably just a branch in the wind, I thought. Still, I got up to check. The glass was fogged from the cold, but through the haze, I thought I saw a faint shadow flit across the clearing. I told myself it was nothing and I went back to the fire, but sleep didn't come easily. Every creak and groan of the cabin seemed amplified in the darkness. The tapping returned, more incessant this time, like fingers drumming against the glass. I gripped the armrest, my pulse racing. "It's just the wind," I whispered to myself, but deep down, I knew better. The next morning, the woods were shrouded in mist. I decided to take a walk, hoping the fresh air would clear my head. The forest was eerily quiet. The only sound was the crunch of leaves beneath my boots. As I made my way down the overgrown trail, I noticed something odd. The trees seemed twisted, their trunks gnarled and blackened, as if scorched by fire. And then I saw it. A clearing I didn't remember from childhood. The grass flattened and singed. At the center stood a massive tree, its bark scarred with strange symbols that seemed to writhe and shimmer in the dim light. My breath caught in my throat. The symbols were unlike anything I'd ever seen. Ancient, almost primal. I don't know how long I stood there staring, but a sudden rustling snapped me out of my trance. My gaze darted to the edge of the clearing, where shadows shifted between the trees. My instincts screamed at me to run, but my legs felt rooted to the ground. Then the wind changed, carrying a whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Leave." I didn't need to be told twice. I stumbled back through the woods, branches snagging at my clothes and scratching my skin. When I burst into the clearing by the cabin, I was out of breath, my heart pounding like a drum. I locked the door behind me and slid the heavy bolt into place. The day passed in a blur. I tried to convince myself that I had imagined the whisper, but the fear gnawed at the edges of my thoughts. By dusk, the wind had picked up again and the tapping returned. Only this time, it wasn't just at the window. It came from the walls, the roof, even the floor beneath my feet. I grabbed the fire poker and stood in the center of the room, my eyes darting to every shadow. The tapping grew louder, more frenzied, until it was so loud that it drowned out all rational thought. And then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The silence was deafening. I stood there trembling, my knuckles white around the fire poker. Minutes passed, then hours. The fire burned low, casting flickering shadows across the walls. Just as I began to think it was over, a new sound emerged. A slow, deliberate scraping at the door. I took a step back. The scraping continued, methodical and relentless, like claws raking against the wood. I knew I couldn't stay. Grabbing my keys, I bolted for the back door, throwing it open and sprinting into the night. The cold air burned my lungs, but I didn't stop. I ran through the woods, branches whipping at my face, the ground slick beneath my boots. Behind me, the scraping turned to heavy footfalls, thudding through the forest with inhuman speed. Panic surged through me, but I forced myself to keep going, the beam of my flashlight bouncing wildly. When I finally broke through the tree line and reached my car, I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking. The engine roared to life and I tore down that dirt road, gravel spraying behind me. In the rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of something, a towering, shadowy figure with eyes like embers, watching from the edge of the trees. I didn't stop until I was miles away. The cabin and Blackwater Ridge, nothing but a distant memory. In the weeks that followed, I tried to rationalize what had happened. Maybe it was stress, or a vivid nightmare brought on by isolation. I still don't really know, but I do know that some places carry an energy, an echo that never fades. And Blackwater Ridge, it's one of those places.